we have to take aim at this narrative that continues to circulate across the college football world, and you hear it every single December, and you hear it echoed throughout the course of the season as it leads into this part of the year, and it is, well, the college football bowl season, it doesn't matter. You hear this phrase, and it irks me to even kind of mention it while we're on the air right now, but I'll do it right now. Meaningless bowl game. That's what you hear people say. What do we think about that? Do we think there's any validity to that? I'll tell you right now, it's not true. It is a myth, and we're about to bust that myth right now, so buckle up. It's about to get a little bit bumpy here. What do people mean when they say meaningless bowl game? Well, let's kind of start at the beginning of that. What does meaningless actually pertain to? Meaning is the value that you assign to something relative to yourself. Okay, so when we talk about the Mayo Bowl, we talk about the Holiday Bowl and coaches getting eggnog and mayo dumped on them. I think that tells you a little bit about how much that game meant to them, so we'll start there. But going back to the meaning of meaning could be different for everybody. And so what I think people are actually saying when they call bowl games meaningless, it usually gets wrapped up into two different thoughts. The first is, well, this isn't a college football playoff game, therefore, I'm not interested. Therefore, doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, that's your prerogative. We'll address that in a little bit. The second part of that is, well, if the players are opting out, it must not mean anything to them. Yo, we're about to take a hatchet to this narrative, so hang on tight. First part of that whole thought, this isn't the playoff game thought. So what should teams that aren't making the college football playoff do? Because we can narrow that list a pretty good amount of across the college football landscape. We can tell you what teams are more likely than not making the college football playoff before the season even starts. Like Tulane, I love Tulane. Tulane, I think, is one of the best programs in the country. We use programs with a U around here. We'll talk more about that probably at a later date. If you get it, you get it. But what should a team like Tulane do in the offseason? They're probably not making the college football playoff. Should they even have spring ball? Should they even bother to field a team? What should they do September through November? Should they even play their games? Because, right, remember what you said now. Meaningless bowl games. Because they're not making the college football playoff. Well, if they're not making the college football playoff early in the season, we know that. Should they even play games? Is their season meaningless? Of course not. That's a fool's errand to run to even think about it that way. What I would also say is the priorities of big college football, I say big CFB like big pharma, same thought here. Big CFB that tells you bowl games are meaningless, their priorities are not the same as diehard college football fans like you and I, and the priorities of teams internally. Because teams internally, I promise you, a goal for every team across the country is to win their bowl game. Like you get in those rooms at the beginning of the season, they have that first meeting to kick off fall camp. You have your goals laid out in front of you, and there's a myriad of different goals, but I would guarantee you that at 90% plus across the country, the goal is win the bowl game. Okay, so teams internally, they want to win the bowl game. And then you go back to players that are, opting out of this thing. So what? Let's be generous and say 5 of 85 players that are opting out of the bowl game because they want to try and protect their future value. So then you have a bunch of people saying, well, the bowl game must be meaningless then if those really good players are opting out. Let's reset that whole thought. 5, again, that's a generous number. Most teams would have less than that. Some don't have any. 5 of 85 players equals what? Let's be generous and say it's right around 6%, 7% of your roster. When has 7% of an entire team ever spoken for the entire team period? When has 7% ever been a number that we're saying is reliable to give us a good indication of how the rest of the team feels? Never. So why are we doing it in this situation? Also, you talk about opting out of bowl games being meaningless. Just because a player thinks that they want to protect their NFL value by not playing in the bowl game doesn't mean the bowl game is meaningless to begin with. It just means that they think that there is more value on their NFL career than playing in a bowl game. It's not that, okay, this has value, therefore this doesn't. It's this value in their mind is greater than this. And I'm not here for opt-outs. I'm personally not a fan about that. But if you want to opt out of your bowl game, again, it's your decision. But let's not pretend that that makes a bowl game meaningless, because it absolutely does not. So, when we talk about meaningless bowl games, notice who's saying it. Notice the people who are talking about bowl games being meaningless. You'll notice it's the same people that, one, aren't really watching college football during the year to begin with. They're the same people that tell you you should go do something else on a weekend whenever there's a quote-unquote bad slate in their eyes. Also, it's the same people that were shouting for shorter game broadcasts. No real college football fan was saying that. Nobody was actually saying, man, I wish it wasn't a 4-hour broadcast. I wish it was somewhere closer to 2.5, 3 hours. No real college football fans that wake up and watch College Game Day on a Saturday morning and then watch Pac-12 After Dark, rest in peace, till 2 a.m. was actually telling you that. Nobody actually felt that way. Same thing is being said here for bowl games. Because I tell you what, when you're off for Christmas break and you have that short window from Christmas to New Year's and you're at home with the family, or maybe you're off from school, you love that you get to watch the Mayo Bowl. You love that you get to watch the Holiday Bowl. Why? Because it's 11-on-11 football. And for us college football fans, as long as they put the ball down and it's a 100-yard field and it's 11-on-11, we will watch, we will be there, we will be all about it. So the folks saying meaningless bowl game, I'd be careful letting the 5% of that fan base or 5% of that college football portion of the public speak for the rest of 95%. Same thing with the opt-outs. Just because a few players opt out doesn't mean there's zero value. It just means they're putting more value on the NFL than their own careers. So last thing I want to say about this, talk about meaningless bowl game. You can talk about the arguments for it. You can talk about, the numbers behind it of what you can make playing in the NFL. And you can talk about the opt-outs. Like you can do all of that. Talk about the TV viewership, whatever you want to talk about. But I would say let's use the eyeballs a little bit here. What I said at the top of this thing. It meant something to those guys last night that celebrated beating Louisville as a USC team that kind of had been down bad for the last few weeks with all this talk around the portal and all the way they finished the season and all the talk around Lincoln Riley. Promise you it meant something to them to have that eggnog dumped on their head coach. Meant something to Neil Brown having that mayo dumped on him after there was all this talk around him maybe even being fired at the end of last season. Meant something to that crowd at JMU during College Game Day chanting that they want to go bowling. And they didn't even win their bowl game, but to even have a chance to do it, man, it meant something to them. It means something to those athletic directors that write an incentive to their head coach's contract of getting to and winning a bowl game. Means something to them. So this whole thought around meaningless bowl games, again, it's a narrative. It's not true. It might be true for some people because meaning is relative, but to the real college football fans, to the diehards, to y'all that are watching the show and listening on podcast in your free time, meaningless bowl games was always a myth, and we'll go ahead and consider that busted for now. So, roll party roll. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.